What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. So another one that was on my radar that I definitely wanted to go over because I liked their first album was the latest offering from Apparition, Disgraced Emanations from a Tranquil State. This comes out also on the 22nd of March on Profound Lore Records. This band formed sometime before 2019. It didn't have their exact date of formation on the archives, so we'll just go with that. They did, however, form in Los Angeles, California, I can tell you that much, and that this is their second album overall. I was a big fan of their first album, Feel. I thought that was just a nasty bruiser of an album, big, heavy death metal riffs, and yeah, this is some flat-out death metal in case you haven't figured that out by the artwork, and of course the logo too. Like, everything about this just screams death metal. So I was naturally already curious about this one, and checking out the comments on our review of Severus, a lot of people were bringing up this one. I mean, I figured they probably would. The guitarist from this band actually did the production, or at least the mixing and mastering of Severus's album, and did a magnificent job. So I figured this would probably be like the next logical one to do next. And this is different. This feels different than the first one for sure. This band has definitely expanded their sound, and I mean, I wouldn't say it's like completely night and day from Feel. Like, there are definitely some overlapping elements. This band definitely has a lot of love for, you know, bands like Morbid Angel, Incantation, and I would definitely say there's a lot of Tomb Mold comparisons, especially the fact that the drummer is the vocalist, and, you know, that's a very Tomb Mold thing. But this album definitely expands their sound quite a bit. The songs on here are overall a little bit longer than they are on Feel. There's one track that's over 8 minutes on here, and two that I believe are over 7 minutes, and I don't think any songs on Feel got over the 7-minute mark. I might be wrong there, but there were a couple that were close. But in terms of like the songwriting, I feel like this is way more expansive and way more dynamic. There's a lot of different elements coming in on this one that weren't as prevalent on the last one. The opening track, Asphyxiation, which there's a lot of like interesting song titles and sort of plays on words here, opens up with just massive blasts, huge tremolo riffs. The production is dark, murky, and muddy, but still mixed really well. Like, the drums cut through the mix. The leads on here definitely cut through all the murk and grime that is created by the bass and the guitars on here. But this song just pretty much erupts after a little bit of atmosphere. There's some cool snare rolls in the blast beats. I love the riff work, and when the first lead comes in, it sounds so much like a Chuck Schuldiner style lead melody. There are lots of like later death moments on here peppered in terms of like guitar harmonies and leads. The end of Paradoxism in particular just has a harmony that screams individual thought patterns. But while you're getting settled into this almost like progressive death metal meets incantation sort of sound here, all of a sudden it takes a hard shift into death doom, slow lumbering chugs. You have clean melodies that show up on top of that to add additional atmosphere, because this album absolutely loves atmosphere. Very similar to like Disembowelment or Dream Unending, which is yet another Tomb Mold sort of comparison in a way. But the song slows down to like an absolute crawl here, and it's just this big, oppressive, monstrous moment. And this was something that did show up in the first one, but I don't think it was quite as dramatic. And going through this album, there's a lot of dramatic twists and turns on here, and pulling from different camps in terms of influences that I definitely didn't hear in the first one. Paradoxism in particular for me was a big standout, notably because it's a little bit more melodic, and I'm not like talking like, oh, it's pretty and poppy and lush and I can hum along to this tune. I mean, you could, but it would still sound dark and twisted and just very unsettling, because that is kind of the vibe on this entire album. But there are solid repeated melodies on that song in particular, like this very, I don't know, it's again very atmospheric, kind of unsettling, but it's very tuneful. It's a tremolo lead melody that pops up and repeats a couple of times, and it's just an interesting sort of hook, and kind of gives us a more, I don't know, again, unsettling nature, but it's kind of interesting how it plays off of the more just powerful, nasty riffs underneath it. And baseline, this album has riffs. Riffs aplenty, and riffs in total different styles. You have a lot more dissonant melodies on this one than I would say on the first one. But you still have like a lot of straightforward old school death metal tremolos, you know, lots of Morbid Angel vibes. And of course you still have some absolutely brutal, nasty chugging. The song Imminent Expanse of Silence and Not, or Not, I don't fully understand that song title. Either way, might be one of the heaviest tracks on here, where it just kind of opens up with just heavy syncopated chugs. It's doomy and murky, and right out of the gate, like, very different than the opening track in terms of, like, it's just more angry and aggressive right out of the rip. It does make good use of a solid death doom breakdown in there, again with clean, haunting melodies on top, which is definitely a staple on this album that happens quite a bit, and it's always the lead guitars on top that kind of capture me even more than the big droning chugs, because they do whatever they can to create some interesting melody on top, whether it's like some very technical, almost like atonal crawling melodies, or just like single droning clean melodies. Anything to make the album sound more dark and unsettling, because across the board there really isn't a moment of brightness on here. Like, this is just flat out dark and dismal as hell. But that death doom breakdown on, I have to read it again, Imminent Expanse of Silence and Not or Not. There's no way in hell I'm going to remember that, especially the or not on there. I don't get the song title. Whatever. That one in particular has this great descending melody, and then there are like blast beat pockets in between. The whole vibe of that breakdown, it's kind of like, you know, free falling off of a cliff, and that's like kind of the blast beat sections, like you're just plummeting, and then every doomy chug that comes in is you hitting a rock on the side of the mountain, which honestly, if you hit that first rock on the side, you're probably dead or paralyzed, so after the next couple, you're not feeling anything. But I love how absolutely sinister and crushing that one is. Like, that is one of the darkest moments on this very dark album, but it really stands out. And again, I like the dynamic shifts between these little blasty sections and these descending death doom chugs. Like, it really makes that stand out. Again, I feel like this album is just very different from the first one. I feel like it's more complex, again, more dynamic. The transitions are even wilder, like they're very jarring at times. But most of it, I think, really comes together really well. As I said before, I feel like this album is a lot different than the debut. Like, I think it's more complex, more atmospheric. There's more attention, I would say, on like dissonant riffing and like almost a progressive song structure in some spots. But it still packs a flat out like old school, disgusting riffy punch when it needs to. And those are generally the moments that kind of lure you back in from all the atmospheric weirdness and some of the stranger shifts on here. The song Circular Crate, I don't even know how to really pronounce that. I don't know if that's even a real word. There's a couple on here that were just like head scratchers. That song is possibly one of the more straightforward ones. Like, the whole front half of that song is just this riffy storm of just, I don't know, everything you love about like classic old school death metal. Again, like Incantation, Morbid Angel, maybe a little bit of Drawn and Quartered thrown in there too. Either way, the riffs on here feel more straightforward. Like, they're kind of just locking on that old school 90s sound. And it has a great instrumental lead in before any of the vocals come in. And this song is just absolutely killer. Like, I love pretty much every second of it. And when it does make its big dynamic shifts, I think they really stand out, because after this riffy storm that takes up, I would say, about half the song, it drops out into this clean passage, which is kind of jazzy. It's, you know, more ethereal sounding. There's a really good lead on top. The tone itself doesn't sound as clean, like it's a little bit squawky, but it sounds good. It sounds organic. It sounds like a little bit of a jam session. But when it comes back into the heavy section, it comes back with these very somber, very sullen riffs, and honestly, the way they're being played and the tempo of it and the fact that the vocals change to more of a scream for a good chunk of it, it kind of sounds like Brave Murder Day, like early Catatonia. And that is a vibe that I did not get on the first one at all. And I really thought this was a cool transition. A lot of the stuff on here I would describe as very like oppressive. Like, it's just sort of like doom and just anger and darkness sort of swirling around you. But this moment on here has a distinctly more somber vibe, like it's more melancholic. And that wasn't something that I felt like was necessarily pursued on the first one. Like, this is kind of a new wrinkle, at least as far as I remember from the first one. And I think it really works with a lot of the band's themes, because they do talk about mental illness a lot, and, you know, talking about all the negative aspects of human emotions, like that sort of sad, overwhelming, sort of miserable feeling, I think is really captured there. And I mean, Catatonia has been experts at capturing that vibe for their entire career. I don't think they've collected as many tears in a jar as like My Dying Bride, but they're pretty close. So there's a lot of things I really like about this album, especially in terms of them writing longer songs that have like more dynamic swings in them. But it wasn't all great. In fact, there are like a couple of moments where I feel like this band kind of got lost in the atmosphere. The end of Imminent Expanse of Silence and Not or Not. I hate that song title now. It all of a sudden sort of like cuts off at the end and goes into this weird atmospheric like outro to it. There's hand drums, there's like some feedback. It's a little jazzy, and it just kind of felt a little tacked on, like it really didn't complement any other section in the song. Like it didn't open that way. There wasn't like anything alluded to that sort of ending in the song at all. But I feel like that song alluded to another song on here that just didn't do much for me, and it's more or less a transitional instrumental, Inner Altitudes Light Transference. It kind of sounds like Imperial Triumphant, which I'm still kind of on the fence about that band. Like, they're just kind of weird. It's a lot of like light percussion or muffled percussion. Like you have like a lot of jazzy drum fills, and I mean, they sound really good. But there's just a lot of ambience, and then what sounds like it could be a saxophone or a trumpet solo. It could also be a guitar effect. It's kind of hard to make out, but it's definitely a just sort of jazzy track that's kind of squashed between, well, two pretty solid tracks. And it doesn't necessarily lead into the last track very well at all. In fact, it just kind of abruptly ends and then the next track starts. So I don't know why it's there necessarily. Like, it really doesn't seem like it adds much to the album, because this album is just swimming in atmosphere anyway. And while I would say there's definitely some jazzy playing in terms of like the song construction, some of the leads, some of the drum fills, this full-on, more jazzy approach just didn't really work for me. And I will say, while I really like how like dynamic this album is in terms of like just wild transitions, killer riff work, and lots of like unexpected turns, it can be a little bit much. For the most part, I think it's really good, but the song Excruciating Refuge in Reoccurring Torment, while I like it because it has some absolutely killer riffs on it, there's like a good slow plotting section on there with just a nasty dark tremolo that sounds like Mortiferum or Mortiferum, however you say that band's name. It does kind of get hung up on transitioning, and I feel like it transitions a little too often in that song. And I think because it shifts around so much, it feels a little bit longer. And it's not the longest track on the album. In fact, Paradoxism is like, I want to say like a full 30 seconds longer, but it doesn't feel that way. But overall, I really dug this, and I was actually kind of surprised in terms of the turns that this band took from their earlier stuff, because I really feel like this one's kind of like pushing into different territory. There's definitely some stuff in here I would say is very comparable to Blood Incantation. Overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. It does get to be a little bit busy at times, but at the same time, what they're doing I think is really cool. Like, there's lots of clever riff work on here. Stuff you would definitely expect if you're a fan of their first album, but also a lot of twists and turns that weren't necessarily there that really show that this band is definitely branching out a bit. Lots of comparisons to be made to Tomb Mold and Blood Incantation, I would say, too. This album definitely shows up a little bit more flash in terms of the songwriting. I would say it's definitely more technical and progressive in a sense, but not like, you know, like Dream Theater progress or anything like that. Like, this is like, you know, writing more ornate songs with, you know, more clever shifts and really showing off some like awesome playing on here. Like, I really think the lead work on here, while solos are minimal, the lead melodies that pop up in here contribute heavily to the atmosphere. And I absolutely love the drum work on here. It's very fluid, and the fact that this guy is doing vocals too is absolutely crazy. It still blows me away when Tomb Mold does it, but I don't know, that just feels like that's like kind of like a next level brain coordination thing that I most definitely don't have. If you're a giant fan of like Morbid Angel and Incantation, if you're an old schooler, or you like, you know, newer bands like Tomb Mold and Blood Incantation, you're gonna find some serious overlap here. I 100% know that Jammin' John will absolutely love this, and he was already sad because he wasn't going to be available for this one. So baseline, if you like Chug and Dissonance as much as Jammin' John does, you will probably dig this, so check it out. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you were looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have new shirts. We have old shirts that are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for all your supports. It's been amazing seeing this channel grow. I know the thank you part where I generally say the same shit all the time, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. This has been an amazing run, and we're looking forward to keeping it going. We have a ton of content in store for you. I know I have a collection update that is well recorded. I just got to edit the thing down, so that's going to take a fair amount of time. Also got some more States of Metal stuff, and I definitely am going to do a follow-up to the heavy but not metal, or are they, bands thing that I did, and looking forward to that one too, because that definitely got some cool conversation going. So yeah, one more big thank you, because you guys are absolutely awesome, and we'll catch you later.